All right. I would like to welcome Jihye Kwon and, excuse me, Dr. Jihye Kwon and Dr. Shawn Rainey to do our professional development session today on assessment and best assessment practices. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to them.
Thank you, David. Let me share my screen for the presentation. Okay, so it would be great when you do not talk, you can mute so that we can have a better audio, I think. Okay. Welcome to the assessment training. This is Principle of Assessment, and I'm Jihye Kwon, Analyst for Co-Curricular Assessment and Research. And Shawn, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Shawn Rainey. I work in planning and institutional research here on campus. And so we do a lot of the external reporting to federal and state agencies. And we're also a resource to help with how you measure your own progress in terms of the programs, offering student services, and the things that you provide to students. We're here to be a resource to help you develop. How do I want to assess those? How do I want to determine what's working and what's not working? And I think that's what Jihye wanted to talk about today, was kind of lay a foundation, talk about what some of your options might be when you're trying to tell that story of what do you do and how do you do it and is it working, and then kind of see what questions you guys might have.
Thanks, Shawn. So I'm an analyst for co-curricular assessment. So meaning I work directly with student affairs directors, staff, and leadership position. And then also as an IR analyst, I do a lot of different ad hoc project for NKU as well. So this session, I'll say the focus is on student affairs and also student services, but also there are many information that can be applied to all faculty, staff in higher education as well. So today's training can be divided into 3 parts: what, why, and how. So the first part is about what is assessment. And I'd like to focusing on the definition of assessment, in particularly in higher education. And then also there are different types of assessment goal in higher education. That can be program goal and also administrative goal and student learning outcome goal as well. So that's the first part. The second part is why. Why we need to do assessment. Why assessment important, and what are the benefit or value of doing assessment. Assessment can be time consuming. Some can be like just additional work, but there are really great benefit of doing assessment, and it's actually helping us to better serve our students. So I'll talk about that a little bit, and then also the main purpose of assessment in higher education. And then the third part is about how. So after we learn about what is assessment, why we need to do that, then I'll talk about how to do assessment in higher education. So I will start with the student learning outcome goals. So for some of you, you may not be familiar with student learning outcome goal, although you are familiar with program goal or administrative goal. So I will show you some examples so that you have a better idea how to define student learning outcome goal for your unit. And then lastly, I will introduce the 3 different assessment tools that are most frequently used and also very effective in assessing our performance. There's some chat.
So
Okay.
Jihye, your sound appears to be kind of fading in and out. I'm not sure if you're moving away from the microphone or where the microphone is placed in your hand.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm using headphone. Let me try without headphone again. is this sounds better or similar?
So far, this sounds good.
This sounds better. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for letting me know that. I just checked the chat. Okay, so yeah, just some of the table of contents. This is about what, why, and how. What is assessment? Why we need to assessment? And what are the benefit and the value of assessment? And after we learn that, we will discuss together about how to do assessment in higher education and student affairs. All right, sounds is much better now. Okay, there are 3 key takeaways that you will learn from this training. The first key takeaway is you will be able to understand the importance and purpose of assessment in student affairs. And like I said, there are many information can be applied to all all higher education professional as well. Second of all, you will be able to define your student learning outcome goal for your own unit. Lastly, you will be able to learn how to use Weave, and then also you'll be also able to conduct a student satisfaction survey and focus group. So those are the main key takeaway. Although this presentation may have a lot of information, I think as far as you have these, you meet these 3 learning goal, I consider that this training would be successful. So keep in mind these 3 key takeaways, and we can start this training. Then let's talk about what is the assessment, particularly in higher education. Assessment, the meaning of assessment can be different in for-profit and non-profit. So I would like to focusing on the assessment in higher education. There can be many different types of definition, and I would like to focusing on one that is very commonly used in higher ed. Assessment is the systematic collection, review, and use of information about programs undertaken for the purpose of improving student learning and development. So here, the program can be student affairs, student services, academic affairs, any types of program that support our students. And I also would like to emphasize that assessment is an ongoing collection. It's not just about checking a box. So assessment should be considered as a cycle. So in a one academic year, you can consider that as a one cycle. You start planning, you implement your assessment, and you review, and then based on your result, you can revise and make any changes you needed for your new assessment plan. And then also, when we do survey or certain types of assessment too, that's a great way to assess our work. But for student affairs and student services department, there are many ways to collect data. So for instance, a lot of staff have a direct interaction with student, whether that's via email, Zoom meeting, or in-person interaction. And that's a really great way to gather qualitative data. And you can tell whether students are happy in NKU. They feel safe, they feel included by having a great conversation, communication, and engagement with your student. So we need to consider assessment as something ongoing that happens every day. And then we need to think about how to collect good data for the assessment. Okay, so that was about the definition of assessment. And now I'd like to talk about why we need to do assessment. Even though we are making effort, we are working really hard, and we actually making a difference, then why we need to do additional assessment in addition to our current responsibilities? I would like to summarize those reasons with three factors. First one is quality. Every higher education professional should be responsible for improving our services support at the level of quality that student needs and our institution expect. So meaning, even though we are doing our best, we are really working hard, but we need to make sure, we need to check whether actually what we are doing is aligned well with our students' needs. Sometimes it can be a little different between what we expect and what they feel. So that's why we need to do assessment. And also our institution expects not just your unit goal, but also we need to align really well our goal with institution expect, which is success by design. So when we create our program goal and student learning outcome goal, we definitely need to align our goal with success by design. So those are the main two things that we need to check and review in assessment process. The second reason why I need to do assessment is accountability. As I said, we do a lot of work, and then there are many different responsibilities for each step. And then we want to make a good influence to our students. We want to have a positive effect to our student. And when it comes to accountability, we need to record the data, what we are actually doing, and what kind of change we were able to make regarding student success. So we need to record what we are doing, which will be data or information. And then we are responsible for review and then regularly check whether to make sure we are at where we want to. So the accountability is also very important for assessment. And then another piece regarding responsibility and accountability is to promote diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. Oftentimes, when we review our assessment result, we find out that there's a gap. And then even though students get same types of service, some students make more progress while other students have less progress. And it depending on their background, their race, gender, first gender status, income level, things like that. So we need to know, we need to educate ourselves how our service should be different. So people usually use the term culturally responsive services. So by reviewing what we've done and what we are doing, we need to we are able to sort of inform us that what are the areas that we are missing regarding DEI work. And the third factor is affordability. As we know, especially during and after pandemic, we are having sort of declining resources in higher education. So in that context, determining the cost effectiveness of our program and services has become essential. And then budget cut can be happen within a division, within institution, or can be from Kentucky's Commonwealth as well. So in that regard, by reviewing what we are doing, we'll be able to tell what types of services are very strong. So meaning we'll be able to tell both our strengths and weakness of our services. And based on that, we'll be able to better idea where we can spend more budget, effort, and time, while sometimes we can some reduce or remove certain types of service and program to be more cost efficient.
Jihye, could I just add one point
Sure.
to expand on that? And so Jihye was hitting on that in that assessment is a way to advocate for yourself, to show how the effectiveness of the services you're providing, to show the benefit of the services you're providing. And that's the kind of information that you can try to utilize when you're asking for additional resources or determining what are the programs that we should scale up or expand, or this is beneficial to the certain segment that we're offering it to. Maybe we should offer it to a broader swath of students. And so you can kind of think of it as the carrot and the stick of assessment. The stick is what Jihye was talking about earlier. It's the accountability. It's the SACS accreditation requirement. If anyone remembers the 10-year review we just went through, where there were evaluations or there was assessment reviews of the student support services, of the administrative units. And so it's a requirement in terms of public accountability. But then there's also this carrot of the intellectual curiosity. I think everyone is conscientious. Everyone believes in the work that they're doing. They want the work that they're doing to be effective. This is a way of determining what that looks like and where do we adjust and where do we change things so that we're providing the student experience that we want to and getting the kinds of student outcomes that we would expect with the things that we're putting together.
Thanks, John. So if any of you have any question, comment, feel free to stop us and then ask any question. We will have a question and discussion session at the end of this presentation, but we're happy to answer any question if you have during presentation as well. Okay. So regarding assessment, I would like to point out that there's a difference between assessment and evaluation. In for-profit area, assessment and evaluation is used interchangeably because they are very similar. But in higher education, there's an important difference between these two terms. This figure shows the difference between assessment and evaluation. So the reason why we do assessment is to increase quality. We are ultimately wants to increase quality for student success. They're the one like sort of goal for every student affair and higher education professional. We do assessment not because to just judge quality, but we would like to increase quality by knowing what are our strengths and our weakness as well. So it's not about judging and then focusing on negative part of our services. So this is also very important distinction between assessment and evaluation. So like I said, assessment is an ongoing process. It's we collect data continuously and then within that one academic year. So I'd like to show an example of assessment cycle in higher education. So there's 4 steps in higher education assessment. We start with planning and we implement the assessment. And after assessment is done, we review, reflect, and communicate based on the result. And the last part is action. So stage 1 is planning. Planning usually starts with the outcomes. So you think about what types of outcomes you would like to accomplish within 1 year. Sometimes you can also have a long-term goal that you can accomplish something within next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. So once you have your goal, and then in ideal way, you would like to consult with stakeholder. The stakeholder, usually the one you work closely, the one with not in your unit, but maybe within same division or other division, but you still work closely. And also what I suggest is consult with assessment expert when you create or revise your own outcome so that you can have a sort of better idea and is likely to have more unbiased outcome because the people outside of your unit. And then when you have, and then last thing is that by working with those assessment expert, we can compare together different assessment tool, and then we'll be figuring out what's the best way to answer your any question regarding assessment. They can be survey or focus group, depending on your question and then your budget and then your situation in general. After you plan outcomes and then assessment tool, you can move on to stage 2 implementation. And here we need to think about timeline when we will use certain types of assessment tool and then when we will finish it. And then if you have any communication plan, that's also, you can do this in stage 2. But the main part is data collection. Some unit collect or gather their own data, so they all already have access to data, but sometimes you need certain data that you don't have access yet. So you may work with IT, IR, or registrar and other offices. And once you have access to the data, you clean the data and then really think about what kind of research question you have. And based on that, we can decide what types of analysis we can do. And from this data collections to data analysis process, it can be done with IR. So you don't have to think about everything you need to do within unit. IR and assessment department is here for help, and that's part of our job. So feel free to reach us out and then ask any help when you need certain types of data, when you'd like to analyze data, but you are not sure what's the best way to analyze data. And then we usually create certain report based on survey or focus group. And that's sort of the main outcome that we can review. So after you have a good report based on your assessment, it's time to reflect your own findings. And this stage, I encourage you, like every steps in your department or unit, review the results all together. And then when you review the report, you're probably able to tell this is just enough information, or you feel like there's a gap and you want to delve into more, so that you need to do another types of assessment. And that's also when you can have assessment from IR as well. We will discuss together, and then we will be able to figure it out what additional tool we need. Maybe we can have a follow-up, like shorter survey to the participant, or we can do other types of interview focus group to delve into a certain specific topics. So when you, after thoroughly review those report, now it's time to act, time to make any changes if needed. So based on that, you probably will be able to tell what the strengths your service had, regarding what you have done, like what positive change were you able to make for your student. And also at the same time, you may find some gaps on some area that need more improvement or progress based on students' response. And those are the information that will tell you how to revise your outcome goal, and then your program, your event, or your budget. And also it may include your steps professional development as well. And then the cycle goes on. So now for next academic year, you start planning again. But once you went through this 4 stages, you probably find that you spend less and less time to do assessment cycle. Okay, and I would like to talk about assessment goal in student affairs and student support unit specifically. When we talk about assessment in higher education, a lot of people think about GPA, retention, graduation, so sort of main as a main indicator. That is true for academic affair. I think academic affair, they have a clear assessment goal, which is academic success, academic performance. But in student affair includes those terms, but there are much more. So even though student affair does not intend to increase student GPA, but sometimes a lot of students who are related to student affair, they have a higher GPA because they have a higher sense of belonging, and then they are engaged more. But in addition to this sort of main typical assessment goal, student affair and student support professional have a far greater story to tell. It's not just about certain the numbers that easily measure. So one of the challenge can be, even though there are many stories to tell, sometimes it's hard to measure, and sometimes some assessment goal is a little complex to tell. There are many different stories, and I think one of the main thing is mentorship. A lot of student affairs, student support staff, they play a role as a great mentor for our student. And we can also be a real friend with our student. And we also help students' physical health, mental health. We promote sense of belonging. We provide a great community for our student. And we make sure we try hard that students feel that our campus is a safe place. So by sharing these great stories, especially with other students who are not related to student affairs, we can attract more students. And also faculty, staff, and leadership position, everybody in NKU, I think it's worth to share our great story so that we can advocate our work, and we can just share what great work we are working on, we have done. And I think a lot of work being done in student affair we are aware of, but not necessarily people outside of student affair. They may not aware of the changes we are actually making for our student. So these are the one more reason why the assessment in student affairs and student support service is very important. And I think we really need to share our great work with our campus. So that was the first part of this presentation. It's about what is assessment and why we need to do assessment. What are the benefit and value of doing assessment? The second part will be the how to do assessment. So is there anybody have any question or comment on the first part before we have a short break and then moving to the second part?
Yeah, I had a comment. I had a question. Was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about it, and that's the data cleaning stage in stage 2, when you talked about the stages of assessment.
Okay, so data cleaning stage is very important, because cleaning means we sometimes inevitably delete some data, or combine certain types of data. So that should be done ideally with the expert, data expert. So maybe for quantitative data, sometimes we find very poorly answered survey answer. So we need to make a decision like whether we want to include everybody, or it's better to just delete a few very poorly answered questions because it will affect the average and it can be skewed the data. So regarding quantitative data, I think it's always better to work with the data expert. And regarding qualitative data, I think it's more easier because we don't have to delete any data regarding interview or focus group. In qualitative data, the cleaning process is more like organizing the data. Like maybe we can organizing some, let's say like very simple example, like positive responsive or neutral responsive, negative responsive, and more like, and then we may have a very creative category. So things like categorizing can be a data cleaning process for interview and focus group. So those are the sort of very simple, typical example for data cleaning in quantitative and qualitative assessment research.
And if I could just add one point to that also, Amy, is that data cleanup is important because it relates to how confident you are in the interpretations that you can draw from the data. If the data feels scattered and it feels messy, that starts to limit the conclusions or the actions that you can draw at the end. I mean, the whole purpose of the assessment is, let's see what we did. Was it effective? And then it's the so what stage. So what do we do the next time? What do we change? What would we monitor? And so the data cleanup is a key piece of that, because you want at the end your analysis to actually allow you to call to action. What do I need to do next? And so I think that's why it's a very critical piece. Sometimes part of that is also related to instrument development. So if you're developing a survey, how clean the data is that you get back can sometimes be correlated with how clear the questioning was, how clear the data collection process was, how clean that was. And so it all kind of, it's all about what do you get at the end. And so all of those are key pieces to help you be able to draw meaningful conclusions at the end of this process.
The other thing I wanted to add, and thank you, Shawn, for that information. A lot of times when we are reaching out for qualitative type responses, we're doing it by survey. One thing we've learned in IR is how important it is when you're designing a survey to get feedback, that it is a survey that is accessible to every student. And so, matrix style questions in a Qualtrics survey, for instance, are not accessible to every student, especially students that have seeing, problems with the vision. So we recommend any survey that you reach out to the accessibility office and have them run it through their document reader to make sure that those questions can be interpreted so that every student has an opportunity to participate in giving feedback about the services.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. That's a really great point. So when we do, especially survey, when you are not sure how to make it more accessible, I strongly encourage you to talk to Cindy Knox, the Director of Disability Service, that she will have a better idea how to do a conduct survey with her student. And so that's something that we don't discuss much, but that's something everybody should be aware of, how to make our assessment more accessible for our students. Any other questions? Yeah, if there's no question at this point, I would like to take a 5-minute break. So it's 11:36. We'll be back at 11:41 and then start with the second part of this training. All right, it's 11:41, so we'd like to resume our training. Okay, so the second part of this training starts with assessment goal. I'd like to focus two different types of assessment goal today. The first one is program outcome. Sometimes it can be called also administrative outcomes. These outcomes are most of unit or department on NKU already have one, and they have been recorded in the WEAV, the online assessment tool that NKU are officially using. So the program outcome, it's about we have this outcome to improve our program and services for student success. And that includes budget, program implementation, persistence, step professional development. And persistent can be applied to certain unit, but not all student affairs and student support unit, it depending on the types of service they are providing. So example can be 75% of persistent to the second year. That can be one example regarding persistent. And then another example is spend 3,000 for step professional development for workshop, certain training, conference, things like that. And then also we can have a long-term goal, such as having more than 100 students enrolled in a certain program within 3 years. So this program outcomes can be written as yearly goals or long-term goals as well. And then second types of assessment goal is learning outcome. And some unit already have their student learning outcome goal, while some unit does not have this goal yet. So I'd like to emphasize this goal more. Student learning outcome is about student. So what student can achieve by participating your activities, your services, or your unit. And that includes skills, experiences, attitude, perception, and any other learning opportunities. So example includes critical thinking, awareness on diversity, equity, and global issues, leadership, and teamwork. And I would like to share more detailed learning outcome statement. So there are many different types of example of learning outcome in student affairs and student support, but these are one of the most common goals in student affairs area. So there are 3 different learning domains: collaboration, teamwork, health and wellness, social justice, diversity and equity. And for your unit, I think it's better to have learning outcome statement, not just learning domain. So meaning it's better to have a detailed sentences regarding your student learning outcome goal. So about collaboration and teamwork, the example includes that students seek help from others when needed and offers assistance to others. And also student listen to and considers others' point of view. So as you see here, the learning outcome statement does not have to be complex, long, or sophisticated. It can be very simple, it can be very short, and I think it's always better to have a simple and short, succinct learning outcome statement to review the assessment at the end. And then second domain is life skills, health and wellness. So example include student engage in behaviors and contribute to environment that promote health and reduce risk. And the second example is students consistently exhibit behaviors that promote own emotional, physical, and mental health. And the second learning domain is diversity and equity. So the example is that students seek involvement with people different from oneself. and also student identify systematic barriers to equality and inclusiveness, then advocate and justify means for dismantling them. So these are the example of statement. And as I said, there are many other different learning domains. So if you are curious, if you want to know more about other learning domain, just feel free to reach me out and I can share more examples of statement as well. So now I would like to turn to Shawn. Shawn will talk about how we can connect our learning outcome goal with success by design, as well as the WIP, which is the NKU's official assessment tool.
Sure. What I'm going to hit on here is, what does integrated planning look like? And so we've got an institutional vision. That's the framework, that's success by design. That's the value statement of, we're going to advance student success through alignment with regional needs. We're going to do that through the life cycle of the student by examining access, completion, career and community engagement. And so that's kind of the color of all the work that we're doing here on campus. That's kind of the focus point. But then each division is a major work area and a major org unit. And so they're all going to have their own visions and what they're working towards, but those should be aligned with the framework of success by design. And so I think that in student affairs, you may be getting ready to start doing some strategic planning. That's absolutely going to line back up to the 3 pillars and advancing student success. And then at the operational level, which is kind of that day-to-day, the unit level work that you're doing, that work is also, it should be aligned with the division that you're a part of. And then it's also going to then be advancing success by design. And so it shows the connection and how all of these things scaffold up, how the individual day-to-day operations are advancing divisional goals. The division is helping achieve the vision of the strategic plan for success by design for the institution. And so all of these should flow together. And so that way there's overlap, and it shows how we're advancing student success, even in this day-to-day operations work that you're doing within your individual units or the programs that you're offering. And so that should color the kinds of outcomes that you're looking towards. And so as you're developing some strategic initiatives for DOSA, they're probably going to be tied to the 3 pillars. And are we advancing access? Are we helping students complete their degree programs? Are we helping students as they try to leave the institution and become engaged members of their communities again? And so that kind of helps shade what it is that you're developing and how all of this folds up into the overall strategic cycle for the institution, or the strategic vision for NKU. And then on the next slide, Jihye talked about Weave. Weave is really, Weave doesn't help you do assessment. What Weave does is help you report the assessments that you're doing. Back in 2009, when we went through the previous 10-year accreditation, we were trying to collect lots of information from all the individual units about the work that they were doing around assessment. How do you evaluate your effectiveness? How do you tell the story of what you're doing? What we found is that some people had Word documents, some people had it in Excel, some people had PowerPoints. There was just a hard way to systematically and in a standard way pull all of this information together. And so we thought that we would utilize a standard application on campus, and Weave's that application. Weave is a place where you can put all of the information that you're doing. It's kind of hierarchical in that you have goals underneath, nested under the goals are objectives. Then you've got measures and metrics. There are targets that you set for these measures. One of the questions I get a lot is, well, what should I be putting in my Weave plan? And think of Weave as your elevator speech. If you walk into the Lucas Administrative Building one day and you happen to get on the elevator with the president or with the new VP of your division, and they ask, hey, who are you? And they introduce themselves. What is it that you do? This is that kind of 2 to 3 minute conversation about who you are, what you do, what are the programs and offerings that you put in place, who are the students you serve, and then what are the outcomes that you're achieving as a part of those offerings? What's that student experience that you're providing to students? Another way that we can think about some of that assessment work is, a lot of times we have students that will give testimonials. Here's the impact of this program to me, and here's how it changed my view or changed my trajectory. Assessment data lets you tell the story that these vivid anecdotes that students share, that's the typical experience for most students that are participating in your programs. And so collecting very robust assessment data lets you do that. It lets you say that here's bright examples of how this program can impact a student, but we've got data that shows that that's the common experience for most students that are participating in these kinds of programs. And so again, it's that idea of helping to advocate for yourself. We believe we're effective. We believe that we're helping impact the student experience, and we're still connected to this divisional vision and this strategic vision of the institution. There's also the kinds of instruments that you use will influence the kinds of assumptions that you can have at the end. And so one of the things we talk about is satisfaction measures. Satisfaction measures, there's nothing wrong with them, but they do limit the interpretation that you can have at the end. They can tell you, did students enjoy what it is that you are offering or what they participated in? And that can be helpful as you try to redesign that stuff in the future. But there's also participation rates where we say, well, let's get some swipe cards. Let's see who showed up at this event. And what that can help you start to do is, are we penetrating the right population of students? If we're offering some kind of sophomore programming, and yet we have less than 10% of the sophomores show up, then participation rates will allow you to look at that and see, what do we change? Do we change the outreach? Do we change the content? And so it's important to remember that the data you collect is going to limit the kinds of interpretations and therefore the kinds of actions that you can take at the end. Now, for some programs, it's pretty easy to come up with objectives. If you are part of a grant, then it's very clear what it is that you're expected to accomplish, what you're expected to achieve, and what kind of data you're going to collect and report on an annual basis. For other programs, it's a little bit harder, but I really just go back to that. It's the elevator speech. You know, how would you tell what you do, how you're doing it, how effective it is? And this is a quick way of doing that. And there should be some utility in the WEAF tool. I know sometimes WEAF feels like, well, this is something that we do once a year. It's a requirement, but it should be useful. There should be some utility to this. And it should be something you can refer back to say, well, here's a quick reference of who we are, what we do, and the kind of impact that we think that we're having for students to the offerings that we put forward.
Thank you, Shawn. So that was the first assessment tool we are presenting in this training with, and I will present the two more assessment tool. So the second assessment tool is survey. Survey is the most commonly used tool in pretty much anywhere, not just higher ed, because of the cost effectiveness and also it's user friendly. So about the cost, once you have your own survey, you can decide how many students you want to send out to. So in that regard, it's very cost effective compared to interview or focus group when you have actual people together to record the data. And also it's user friendly, meaning the currently NKU use Qualtrics as a survey tool. Qualtrics is a very user friendly tool. It does not take long to learn how to use Qualtrics. So maybe if you have it log in, it looks maybe like there's too much tab. And it's true that there are so many different functions in Qualtrics, which also I don't know all of them. But regarding just sending a survey and then creating report, you just need to know few different functions. So in that regard, I think it's very user-friendly software. And in survey, we usually ask about experiences, satisfaction, and awareness. These are the main three things we would like to learn from our students. And as I said, Qualtrics is very easy to learn, and there's an official training from IT department. It can be done for one unit. It can be done just one-on-one session. And that's what I also did when I started working in NKU. It was a really great session. So if anybody wants to learn Qualtrics and create your own survey, send the survey, there's a training available. But also, since I'm working with DOSA and ESS, Enrollment and Student Success, I'm also happy to provide any training regarding Qualtrics as well. So that is about if you want to create your own survey. The benefit of creating your own survey is you can save time, and then you are the only one have access to your student data. So you can protect your privacy more. But there's also another way to do survey is you can just work with Aya or with me, then we can work together creating survey question together, and I can create the survey and then send out the survey. Only thing I need is the student data, student email list or username from you. So meaning I will have access to your student data. And after I close the survey, I can create the executive summary and report for your survey as well. So there are two options. It really depending on your workload or your preference. So it really depends on your convenience. And if you decide to conduct your own survey, there's three things we need to keep in mind. We always start with the big ideas. We usually have 3 to 5 or 6 different big ideas that you want to know, you want to delve into more. It can be to what extent they are satisfied. What are the main challenges they are currently have? What are the things that they are not happy about our certain services? So once you have those big few ideas, then we can sort of divide those big ideas into multiple questions. So let's say if you are curious about satisfaction, then that big idea can be divided into multiple questions, such as when the timeline of service was something students were satisfied or not. And then we can also ask whether the step was kind and very useful for them. So, and then we can also ask, in general, they feel included, they feel like they are also part of the community. So there can be a lot of different questions just based on satisfaction, which is the one big idea. So that's just one example that how we create the survey questions. So always start with the big ideas that you really want to know. And the next thing is survey questions should be simple, clear, and direct. When it comes to just imagine that when you're a student and you got survey and they ask you to complete the survey. And it's not something required, it's something maybe additional work, something you can do, but you don't have to. But then if the survey question is poorly written, whether it's too long or repetitive, then you don't want to answer, you don't want to complete the survey. So what we need to do, make it simple, clear, and short. And also another important point is we need to avoid leading question. After you have your all survey question, I strongly encourage you to have one external person outside your unit to review your question, to see whether your question leading to whether positive or even negative answer. And it's not actually uncommon. Some survey can just lead answer to certain direction, which we need to avoid. So those are the things we need to think about when we are creating and after we create the survey questions. Last thing is the reward. Still more survey has been done without any reward. And the reason can be because of just because of budget, but sometimes it's because of additional work. You need to work with all card department and other department to provide the reward. But when it comes to the quality of response, the providing reward really make a huge difference regarding the quality of the response and also response rate as well. And also we are asking their time and effort. We are asking students time and effort to better serve for our work. So I really think we shouldn't take it for granted, their time, the survey response. So I strongly empathize that when the budget is available, providing $5, $10, or $15 for student all card I think it's required, except when it's like absolutely no budget for that. And sometimes we have just one or two huge reward, maybe like $500 bicycle, but guaranteed reward definitely increase more response rate and having more effect on quality of responses. So I wanted to emphasize this, the importance of reward regarding the quality of response when you conduct a survey.
And I
Okay,
just
so-
had one more, I'm sorry, Jihye,
Sure.
I keep
Go ahead.
doing this to you, I apologize.
No, go ahead.
One other thing I just wanted to add about when we're talking about surveys is if you were asking people to take the time to answer your questions, there's some kind of responsibility or obligation to utilize the things that they're giving you. Not every idea, but if someone took the time to give you feedback, there's some kind of obligation that you have to try to utilize that or to do something with that data. Sometimes it can be frustrating where you'll get a survey and they'll say, hey, we want to hear your ideas. We want to change this experience. You give them a bunch of things and then that program stays the same for the next 2 or 3 years. And you walk away going, oh, well, they didn't do anything with what I told them. Everything still stays the same. And so if you really want people, if you're asking the right questions because you think that they'll provide you insight into what you want to do, there's some kind of mutual obligation for you to then try to utilize that data. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah. Thanks, Shawn. And so in this slide, I want you to think about, think or imagine your own survey. So those are the 3 components. So first thing is about purpose. The purpose of your survey is to do what? That will be your goal. And then by assessing what? By assessing the student you are serving, or you are curious certain student population based on race, first-gen status, student classification. And by doing this survey, so we can use it for what? That'll be probably something Shawn just mentioned for next academic year, for our current event or program, if we can make any changes. So these are the 3 main components that we need to think about when we conduct our own survey. Purpose, and then certain to whom we will send out the survey, and then so what? After survey, we can do what? So these are the sort of worksheet that you can work on when you start your own survey. Okay. The third and the last assessment tool I'd like to introduce is focus group. Focus group is also very common, but relatively less common compared to survey because it's relatively less cost effective, and we need an expert regarding qualitative research. So in many cases, focus group is done after we do our own survey, because many times after we close the survey, we found the gap, or there's an area that you want to hear more from your student. That's when we decided to do an interview or a focus group. The advantage of doing focus group is we can get the really good qualitative data because you can directly ask questions to your student. And we can also lead a very deep discussion. To have the focus group, we need to have a moderator and note taker. And ideally, it's better to have observer as well, because to observe both verbal and non-verbal feedback from our student. And for moderator, it's ideal to have someone who have experience in qualitative research or interview or focus group before. And then if you do not have that experiences, IR department can help. We can have an analyst as a moderator who can lead the discussion. And as many of you know, during focus group, you or your staff cannot be in the focus group because then student answer will be biased. So it's ideal to have one assessment or focus group expert and then one more step outside of your unit. Ideally, the one who work with you frequently, and then one or two note taker. So those are the main setting for focus group. Focus group, I would like to also emphasize three important factors when you conduct a focus group. The first thing is confidentiality. So we need to respect our student. We need to protect our student data. So we have a written document regarding confidentiality of focus group, and we need to inform their rights, and we need to have their signature to get their consent for the focus group. And then second thing is to encourage like authentic and honest discussion. The setting should be relaxed and quiet, and the session usually recorded, whether like entire session with video, audio, or just audio. It depending on the context. And we, like I said, we need to have a note taker to record the session, both verbal and non-verbal feedback. The last thing is about the moderator. The role of moderator is very important because that person leads the discussion and asks questions and also observe the feedback as well. So the moderator ensures that everyone feels comfortable so that there's a good rapport for to get the good quality answer. So there was the three main assessment tools we would like to suggest for your unit, but there's also other different types of assessment tool for student affairs and other student support department. The first thing is that currently many units are working on the number of students. So you can track number of students by year or by certain event or program. That can be the one simple way to do your assessment. And NKU is doing two different surveys, destination survey and campus climate survey. And it's a comprehensive survey, and for a lot of units, there are at least one or two, usually a few relevant questions. So based on that answer or result from that question, you can also collect your assessment data as well. And there's a national level survey. We have question from Ashley. I'm not sure about what SRLS. Sean, are you aware of this? You're on mute.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to find the unmute button. No, I wasn't familiar. If Ashley could maybe student leadership. Okay. No, I'm not. I wasn't familiar with it.
Yeah, at least IR have not done like this survey before regarding student leadership.
But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't. Just because we haven't done
Right.
something doesn't mean that we wouldn't. And I think the first steps to that would be we get together a group of stakeholders. We talk about what are the outcomes or dimensions of that survey, why we think it's valuable. We can start talking about how it links to what information would that survey tell us about DOSA outcomes, about success by design. What would that be information around so we could show progress and start telling the story of? And so that might be the kind of information that's helpful to Tiffany when she's talking about students that are a part of her leadership and development programs. You know, is this a survey that would be focused on just them? Would it be all students? And so if this is something that stakeholders are wanting to explore, then I think we get a group of people together and start talking through some of those questions. What's the purpose? Mm-hmm. What kind of information is it? How would we respond to it at the end when we get this information back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good thing about like having this conversation with many different states in NKU is we get to know different types of assessment tool in addition to what we are currently doing. So thank you, Ashley, for that information. So there's two different national level survey regarding student engagement, NSSE, BESI. These are the largest national survey regarding student engagement, meaning most of institutions participating usually once in every 3 years. So NKU also have been participating once in every 3 years, and we are planning to participate in this year as well. And since it's about student engagement, I believe a lot of unit have can find some question that can be related to their service and support. Yeah, so like Sean said, when we do, especially national level survey, we have a meeting with our stakeholders. So currently we have sort of a committee regarding NSSE and BESI, and we are hearing from them what they want to achieve by doing this survey. Because first of all, there's a customized survey we can sort of add to this NSSE and BESI, but also after we get the result back from them, we can do our own analysis because we will have also the raw data as well. So I think that's important when we participate in national level or comprehensive survey, it's always better to prepare before, like not just sending survey, getting survey, and then thinking about what need to do, but we can also plan before and be really specific about what we want to what we can achieve by participating this survey, because this survey usually have a high cost and then takes a lot of times and effort. So that's something I are working on with this NSSE and BESI.
And then also just to add one other point there, in talking with Dr. Howard, as DOSA is starting to develop their strategic plan that's linked to success by design, there's also, Jihye talked about the opportunity for us to put custom questions in some of these nationally administered surveys. And so again, with the idea being that these customized questions that we build would help tell us pieces about the strategic direction of DOSA or of the institution, where are there gaps in the information we're collecting, or what would help us tell the story better of what's advancing either within a division or at the institutional level. And so it's that kind of stakeholder outreach that's really important. So that way there's utility at the end. If you go through the effort of administering a national survey, paying for a national survey, getting a good response rate because you're marketing it, you're promoting it, there's got to be some utility at the end. How do we use this? What does this tell us that we didn't know? Or what would this tell us that we should then try to feed back into that assessment cycle to either change what we're doing or modify the offerings that we have?
Absolutely. And then last piece about retention, graduation, GPA, and on credit hour, which is I currently create the report based on this information 4 times per year, but not for all unit, but for ROCKS, LAMP, CRC, the campus rec, housing, and Greek life. So because the students who are engaged with those units usually have a higher performance. So it really depending on director if they want to participate in that report or not. So anyone under student affairs or enrollment and student success wants to also get this data for your unit, feel free to reach me out and ask this information so I can also provide that information as well if you want. Okay, the last part of this training is about assistance. So I mentioned several times IR can help, I can help, and I also mentioned about the assessment cycle. So I'd like to be more specific about how I can actually help. So first step, I strongly encourage to everybody is having a meeting with co-curricular assessment analysis, which that's me. So for that meeting, you don't have to have like all planned already. You don't have to have a very specific outcome assessment plan, assessment tool. I'm happy to create and revise any learning outcome goal if you have any. And I'm also happy to brainstorm together from the scratch. So feel free to reach me out, ask me a meeting. We will have a one-on-one, or I can have a meeting with your unit to start the assessment cycle. And after we have the goals, we will compare different types of assessment tool, and then so that we can have the best assessment tool available for your unit. And the next step is data collection process. So if I already have the access, I can clean the data, and I can also analyze data. And then if you already have a data, you can grant me done access, and I can also start clean and then analyze the data as well. And I can create the assessment report for your unit. And then the review process, it really depending on you. If you prefer your unit just review and then identify strengths and weakness, but if you want external person, I'm happy to join that review process and review your strengths and weakness together. And then after that, we need to review our current goal. And if any, we need to revise assessment goal for our next academic year. In next academic year, I hope to have a meeting with you again to review the assessment goal. So this is the sort of cycle for the assessment for student affairs and student support services in NKU. So that was all we have for this training today. And I'm now want to hear from you if you have any question or comments on our training today.
Jihye, thank you. I just wanted to jump in really quickly because one of the things that jumped out at me was under assessment tools for student affairs. And one of them, the last one was GPA and earned credit hours. I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about when you have the study on GPA, they're data that fall within certain GPA bands, correct? The data falls within, is it reported that way?
Could you elaborate your question?
So I'm just remembering how the work that we did in IR to look at students falling within certain GPA bands. And we did some very careful studies to make sure that the bands that we actually developed, they're very accurate in terms of, you know, whether it's a low band, I'm trying to remember, you know, the 2.5, the 2.75, and it was just very, it was very succinct what we had done to determine what those bands should be before we reported them out as a tool. So when this
is probably even more streamlined than that, Amy. This is really looking at performance of students who participate in programming versus common peers or similar peers that didn't. So for example, it's students that participated in the ROCKS program. And then we would compare participants that year, first fall earned credit hours, first fall GPA, first year GPA and earned credit hours, to other African-American or Black students that perhaps didn't participate in that program, to try to gauge as a proxy of the impact. You know, what does this program help students do? And so it can be looking at the persistence, the retention from term to term, but then actual performance. And so Leo is doing the same thing with LAMP. We found similar things for Campus Rec, as Jihye was saying, that, you know, by going there and students establish a sense of community. Actually, if students go to Campus Rec more than once a semester, you actually see like differences in performance from those that participate versus those that don't. So it's that kind of GPA kind of analysis of comparison to similar peers that did or didn't participate. But I know what you're talking about, where we've done bands before, where we say that murky middle, a 2.5 to a 3.5 high school GPA. How do those students look when they enter into the pipeline or start engaging with some of the programming? And there's always the ability to do that as well. If there's a particular profile of a student that you want us to examine to see, is your programming better geared for a particular type of student or more beneficial to a particular type of student in terms of high school GPA, academic readiness, or some other indicators? If you have some sense of belonging indicators, does that programming differentially impact students like that? And so we absolutely can do those kinds of things as well. But the first part is a consultation with Jihye. Here's the question I have. Here's the research question. This is what I want to try to figure out. This is what I want to try to study. Here's my audience, my population. How do we get to some kind of conclusion at the end?
Thank you.
Any other questions? If there's no question, I would like to move to the discussion. I was thinking about some discussion point we can have after this training, and this training has a lot of information, so we really don't expect you to remember everything. It's kind of more like overview, and if you need additional help or if you need a like reminder what was it, then just feel free to reach me out. And then but we would like to learn from you, like hear from you about what kind of challenge you have, like your particular unit. Is there anything that like prevent from you doing some types of assessment, whether that's budget, like not enough step, or you feel like you need more skills and knowledge? So I would like to hear from you, either any challenges you may have. So that would be good information for IR and also the undergraduate assessment as well.
Jihye, while they're thinking about that, Ashley asked in the chat, we're starting to be interested in students coming from Appalachian counties and rural counties. Do we have a way to indicate this?
There's not a flag built in SAP, but if we get what are the counties that you're interested in, we can absolutely build it on the back end. So that way, if we run standard reports for you anyways, then that's a flag that we can start doing a breakout by. Or if it's something that we need to customize and build because you want to look at a new report, we absolutely can do that. We just kind of need an indicator of what are those counties of interest. And so that way we can start tracing students back to those.
Yeah, actually you can reach out to ir@nku.edu if you have any question. So yeah, definitely we can help on this one as well. If there's no challenge currently, then we also would like to hear from you about your assessment practices, how you collect and gather assessment data, or if you have any idea regarding how we can share and advertise more our work to entire campus to share our great stories.
Maybe that's a question I could pose to the group is how, for everyone that's on the call, how do you share your assessment results? Do you feed it up the administrative chain? Is it your VP or your AVP that looks at those results and talks with you about them every year? Because I feel like sometimes there's a gap. You do the work, but we never circle back to tell the story and celebrate the successes. And so do you feel like those things are already in place, or do you feel like there should be more emphasis on sharing, all the positive stories and the positive work that people are doing around assessment? Okay.
Well, it seems perhaps we could develop a post-session survey to send out to everyone that was in attendance, and we could see if we could get some responses that way, Shawn and Jihye.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, David, you can tell who participated in this session today, like their email address or things.
We can send it to everybody who initially registered for the session, because
Okay.
some people may choose to watch it later on if they had a conflict with the meeting time.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we understand assessment can be a little overwhelming because we all already have a lot of responsibility, especially during pandemic. So what we wanted to share today was this is assessment, this is how to do assessment. but that doesn't mean we want you to like start right away since assistance is available. So feel free to send us an email or send a meeting invite to me, Sean, or to IR analysts. We are we're always happy to help. And then we plan to send out the survey regarding this training. So please share your thoughts and feedback on our training today. Uh, if if there are any lingering questions before we say goodbye.
I'd like to thank both Dr. Kwon and Dr. Rainey for being here today. We really do appreciate it very much. I know people have a lot going on, but there are a lot of people here learning a lot of great things. As a reminder to everybody, once this video has time to process and I get captions on it, I will post it to the Student Affairs webpage so that if you want to view it later, you can. And then another reminder that we have some additional upcoming professional development sessions. June 14th is registration and student schedules. June 28th is financial aid and student accounts. July 12th is web development and website updates. And July 26th is social media success and data analytics. So we hope to see everybody there for those. I think that all of these sessions are wonderful, and I'm glad that you were able to make it today. So thank you all very much.
Sounds like a great session. Thank you all for joining today and have a wonderful day.